Welcome to the 9th Dungala Kaiela Oration. My name is Langton and I'm your MC for tonight. Before I begin, just some housekeeping. So the toilets are through the foyer and off to the left. Exits, there's 2 in the foyer and 1 out to my left. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I'm standing on the lands of the Yorta Yorta Nation and their clan groups. I'd like to acknowledge our ancestors and our elders who passed and who are present. I would like to acknowledge our distinguished guests, Chair of the Kaiela Institute, Paul Briggs OAM, Arnie Rochelle, and our elders who have joined us here tonight. I'd like to acknowledge our guests from the University of Melbourne, Vice-Chancellor Professor Glyn Davis, Deputy Provost Professor Richard James, Associate Provost Professor Marcia Langton, Pro-Vice-Chancellor Professor Sean Ewan, Dean of the Melbourne Graduate School of Education Professor Phil Rickard, Head of Department of Rural Health Professor Julian Wright, and I'd also like to acknowledge Victorian Commissioner for Gender and Sexuality, Rowena Allen, our Mayor of City of Greater Shepparton, Denny Adam, and councillors. Tonight we have a fantastic program with our orator, Professor Marcia Langton, delivering our 2017 oration. Paul Briggs and Professor Sean Ewan will provide opening remarks, and Vice-Chancellor Professor Glyn Davis will provide a response to the keynote and also closing remarks to end our evening. Now I would like to begin proceedings by introducing Auntie Rochelle Patton, who is a Yorta Yorta elder, Quay, and someone I really admire. I'd also like to introduce Belinda Briggs, who is a Yorta Yorta woman and who is part of the Language Restoration Program at the Kaiela Institute. Shane Clark, for our welcoming ceremony, will be playing the ditch. I'm really pleased they're able to join us tonight. Could you please welcome?
Thank you, Shane, and thank you also to Rochelle. invited to share a few words and to also do an acknowledgement to country and ancestors, and I'm going to do that in language. Before I share with you these important words, first I'd like to pay my respects to all of you here this evening, and in particular my parents and family. It's always good to see, you know, my family out in the audience, and also to have Annie Rochelle stand beside me. It's standing up here is not something that I'm used to. So forgive me too, I'm reading from my phone, I'm not speaking off the cuff like somebody else. As well as parents and family, I'd also like to acknowledge Sharon Atkinson Miller, who for the last 5 or 6 years through the Kaiela Institute's Language Revitalisation Program, Yalkalochpa, mentored and also quenched my thirst to know language. At least I think she tried. I think I pushed her to her limits a little bit with all my questions and wanting, I guess, affirmation of any new learnings or insights I thought I had. Sometimes I'd find out that they weren't so new and that they were old. And so the result of that experience is a greater affinity with Yori Waka, deeper appreciation of who I am, and now in a position to share and pass that on, all the learnings, and being able to say the following words. Nyana nita de malang, uma dama dama nina galnyan yakaramja. Nini dama la yembana hikero poro gara. Nini yembana pinato waka. Yana bana dana dewa maravan yor waka. Papara banarak. Yana nangari. Damaran and ina. Nyanan bura. We are gathered here today. Give love and respect to my elders, past and present, and my ancestors born of this country that lived and walked here in your country since time immemorial. We remember them in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie Rochelle and Belinda, for your kind and warm welcome to the country. I'd like to now introduce our next speakers, Paul Briggs and Professor Sean Ewan, who will provide opening remarks. Paul Briggs is a Yorta man and the Executive Chair of the Kaiela Institute. Paul, among his many accomplishments, is first and foremost the President of this fine establishment, the Dungala Football Netball Club. Paul initiated the Dungala Kaiela Oration to establish a platform for celebrating Aboriginal cultural identity, creating a shared vision for the people of the Golden Murray, and building bridges to promote Aboriginal and social economic development. Professor Ewan is founding director of the Posh Centre for Indigenous Health and just recently the newly appointed Pro Vice Chancellor Indigenous at the University of Melbourne. Professor Ewan, among his many accomplishments, has just recently invested into the Goulburn Valley by negotiating with the Department of Rural Health and Kaiela Institute 3 PhD Indigenous fellowships to this region. Could you please welcome them both to this
Good evening, everyone. Excuse me. Well, welcome here tonight to the 9th Dungala Kaiela Oration. I want to say that the opening, the opening of ceremony that's emerging is a beautiful thing, and it really stirs the spirituality and our memories, and when we hear language and you hear it being spoken by your kids, that's a pretty emotional time. It connects us to our grandparents, and to the history of our land. It's a really strong spiritual connection. And we know that our grandparents spoke language fluent, it was their first language, and we know that it stopped with our parents. So to cross that bridge again and to re-establish the Yorta language and its presence in our conversations gives us great aspiration for the future ahead of us. And it is being led by this generation of young people, but with great pride from people, the elders of our community. So, just in saying that, I'll just say good evening and welcome to the 9th Dungala Kaiela Oration. On your behalf and mine, I wish to acknowledge and welcome you here to the Dungala Football Netball Club, but onto the lands of the Kalithaman, clans of the Yorta Nation. I pay my respect to our ancestors and their memories and practices, and to the elders of all the respective family groups. I wish to acknowledge and pay my respect to elders present, and also pay deep respect to Professor Glenn Davis from the University of Melbourne, who's been a great friend and supporter of the DKO and Melbourne University's partnership with us here in the region. Melbourne University have partnered with the Kaiela Institute for the past 9 years in the Dungala Kaiela Oration, but in our efforts here in the Golden Murray over the last potentially about 13 years with the Academy of Sports, Health and Education, originally with the Faculty of Medicine. That partnership was about life expectancy and quality of life outcomes. And I think we're starting to experience that with that introduction from Belinda, that we are starting to get those quality of life experiences. Tonight I'm really excited that Professor Marcia Langton is presenting tonight's oration, and there is no one more eminent than Marcia to comment on the politics, strategy and opportunities that face Australian society in general, but the Golden Murray and Aboriginal people, in particular Yorta people. So we pay particular welcome to Marcia, who is also a long-time friend and contributor to the Golden Murray, the city of Shepparton, and to Yorta people. The Dungala Kaiela objective is to stimulate prosperity and productivity, innovation, and to provide support to courageous acts of positive change. The state of spiritual and practical well-being of this region, I feel, has been at a very low point for a number of generations. History has been unkind and has placed us all at risk. We will be, and we should be, measured and brought to account by our actions. Acknowledging the rights of Aboriginal people, re-establishing the economies of Aboriginal people, and building a collective, collaborative approach to the prosperity and repositioning of the value of Indigenous peoples is a Golden Murray challenge, but it's a challenge for Australian society. And I think we've taken up that challenge here in Shepparton and here in the Golden Valley, and I think we're starting to feel the positions of change, the winds of change occurring. I think that we have commenced a major shift in the culture and behaviours of the Golden Murray, of institutions and leadership. The past 15 years has seen strategies like the Dungala Kaiela Oration, the social inclusion agendas of the Dungala Football Netball Club, which Kaiela Institute, the Yorta Yorta Nations, the joint management approach, the input from corporate Australia through the Jarman partnership with bodies like Melbourne University and KPMG Australia. The increased cultural diversity of the region is creating a new approach to innovation. I think we've been challenged by that, and when I say we, I think we as a society have been challenged over the past 15 years to accommodate and to make room for the cultural expression and identity of lots of different peoples that are coming on the country. And I think that's provided an opportunity for the discourse around Indigenous futures to occur. And I think that's been a healthy thing. Tonight I'm looking forward to Marcia's expertise, her expert deliberations, and to ensuring that the conversations that are generated here tonight will continue. In closing, I pay my respects to the previous DKO contributors over the past 8 years. Who've also made a valuable contribution to the discourse, and to all of you who are attending here tonight. I think you're sort of consistent with the numbers of people that have been attracted to the DKO, and I want to thank you all for your attendance. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And my job, so that it's very clear for me, is to welcome you and thank you on behalf of the University of Melbourne. Firstly, thank you to the warm welcome from Shane, Belinda and Auntie Rochelle. Belinda particularly in terms of NAIDOC Week and all the things that come out of this region and revitalisation of language. That was a really awesome surprise. As we mentioned, my name's Sean Ewan. I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Indigenous Things at the University of Melbourne. I've lived on Wurundjeri country for about 2 decades now. My mother's country is in the Western Districts of Victoria, Gunditjmara country. And I pay my respects to elders present, past and in particular future. And on behalf of the University of Melbourne and welcome, or Womenjeka in the language on which the Parkville site sits, to the 9th Dungala Kaiela Oration. Oration is a really important event in the university calendar and is the bookended event, if you like, with the NAM Oration as well. The university's partnership with this region is an important and reciprocal one. Indeed, the university learns much from listening to the people from the Aboriginal communities from around here, and is both a historical and contemporary source of significant leadership. For example, just last week we ran a national leadership program for Aboriginal people working in health, and the participants from this region greatly enriched the conversation and the dialogue, even if one of them had lost their voice. I'm very much looking forward to tonight's oration, Marcia, and as I said, on behalf of the University of Melbourne, thank you for welcoming us so very warmly.
Could I just say thank you to Rochelle, Auntie Roche, for that the smoking ceremony. There you are. Thank you. Also, a particular welcome to Auntie Elsie, who's in the audience with us tonight, and also to a good friend of mine who's in the empowered communities in the Kimberley region, Ian Trust, who's with us and has come down especially to partake in the Dungala Kaiela Oration from Kununurra. So that's I think he wins the meat tray for the furthest travel. So welcome and thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul, Professor Ewan, for your opening remarks and setting the scene for our oration running theme, which is defining Shepparton. I need to apologise, I should have acknowledged you as well, Deb, as one of our distinguished guests. But I will introduce now Deborah Cheatham, AO, and the Dungala Children's Choir. Deborah is a Yorta Yorta woman and the founder and artistic director of Short Black Opera Company. Deborah's achievements among many include qualifications from the Metropolitan Opera and Juilliard School of Music in New York. Deborah is the creator of the first Indigenous opera, Pecan Summer, based on the walk-off from Cumbregudja. In an extraordinary effort, her company performed Pecan Summer at the Sydney Opera House with members of the choir last year. Deborah works with many Indigenous singers, some you are about to hear, to find their voice and their connection, not just to song, but to country, to language, to ceremony, and to each other. Tonight you will have but a small taste of the potential of Deborah's company and the capability of our young people to excel. Please welcome Deborah Cheatham and the Dungala Children's Choir.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Tui, and thank you, Paul. Thanks, Sean. It's been an incredible 9 years. I can't believe that it actually has already been 9 years, except for the fact that I know that next year this extraordinary choir, Dungala Children's Choir, turns 10. So that's how I keep time in my life. What a wonderful way to mark the passing of the years, to see these beautiful children grow into young women and young men. We don't have many of our boys with us this evening, but let me assure you, we do have some boys in the group and they're very special to us. To see these young children grow into the adults who will be the elders of the future. They will be the leaders in a time that's not so very far away. And I think that you'll hear by their singing, you'll see by their faces and the efforts that these children undertake, not only at the Sydney Opera House, but here for, I think, at least the 7th time that I can count at the Dungala Kaiela Oration. This song, Galianina, lyrics that were given to me by one of our other eminent custodians of language, Zita Thompson. Ali Zita penned these few lines and said, do you think you could set this to music? And you don't have to ask me twice. This Yorta Yorta land. I'm going to invite Dana up to join the choir. Now, Dana, you're actually here Well, we just met on the way to Shepparton this afternoon, did we not?
Yes, we did.
We met in Wallan, yeah? At the BP, as usual. But we actually met something like, gee, how old were you when you first joined the choir, Dana?
I think I was 13 or 14, so yeah.
We're only 13 years old when Dana joined the choir after having seen the very first performance of Pecan Summer, which took place over at Westside in Marubna. You were there with your auntie that day, and did you ever think that you'd be singing that opera at the Sydney Opera House a few years later?
No, it was so surreal, and I just can't even, well, back then I wouldn't have even imagined it, so I'm really, really glad and grateful.
We're grateful that you're here too, Dana, and I'm glad we bumped into each other this afternoon, but even if I'd just seen you sitting there, I would have invited you up. Because this next song has been sung at every Dungala Kaiela Oration since the choir's been invited. It's called Do You Know Me? And one Sunday afternoon, we rehearse here on Sundays, I'd driven up and we decided that we were going to write a song because we thought that was the best way to move things along a little more quickly. And Dana, you came up with a line that I really love. And all around Australia, I talk about this song when I teach it to other kids. And I always talk about Dana. So here she is. This is what she looks like if you've heard me give that speech before. But do you want to say what that line is?
If you hear the word Aboriginal, what do you see? Do you see you, or do you see me?
And that changed everything for our choir because we decided from that moment on we're going to write our own repertoire. And we sing other songs as well, but the strength really lies in the words and the sentiments and the language that comes from these kids. So will you join us for this one? It's your song. Please welcome Dana. Because it might interest everybody to know what you're doing now. You've graduated from Year 12, and what's happening now?
So I work at the University of Melbourne. I'm with the Rep Mob this year doing a diploma in management leadership. So, and I work in administration at the law school. So yeah.
Australia's republic will have a female president, and I'm pretty sure it's going to look like this young woman. One of the most exciting things each year is to have new members of the choir join us. We've got a couple of new members this year. Would you like to put up your hand if this is your first year in the choir? So the choir continues to grow, and as children graduate, they go on to university and they do other exciting things in their life. We're just really proud to be starting all over again with a new group and them finding their own voices, their own songs. This is one that we wrote just last year in Dungala. It's called Bira Mamana, which means coming home. And thanks to Belinda Briggs, we were able to put this beautiful song together about the Kaiela, the river red gum. And you can't come to this country and not just be struck by the beauty of those red gums, especially if you get to do the trip in the afternoon with the sunlight streaming through. And so it is in Benalla as well, which is of course also Yorta Yorta country. And you think about those trees, what have they seen? What journeys have they been part of? What shelter have they provided? And that was the inspiration for this song, Heading Home, Bira Mamana.
Thank you, Deborah and Tony. Thank you to the Dungala Children's Choir. I just always love hearing you sing and have had the privilege to hear you sing for quite a while now, as I've had my daughter who was part of the choir, and just always impressive. Beautiful. You look absolutely beautiful tonight. I guess there's something to be said about opera. Deborah would say that opera tells a story, and this is what I see in this space. I hear the voices of our young folk, a number who play here at the club, the story on this wall, the story in these photos, and culture is very much alive in this space. So once again, thank you, Deborah, and thank you to the Dungala Children's Choir. I'm very honoured to be able to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight. Professor Marcia Langton's oration is titled From the Margins to the Mainstream, Indigenous Recovery in Rural Australia. Professor Langton is a descendant of the Yiman and Bidjara people in central Queensland. She is a University of Melbourne Redmond Barry Distinguished Professor. In recognition as one of Australia's most respected Indigenous academics, Professor Langton was appointed as the first Associate Provost at the University of Melbourne. Professor Langton is notable for her work on native title, her work on the agreements, treaties and negotiated settlements project produced a database of one of the most comprehensive sources of agreements and contracts held between governments and Indigenous peoples around our nation. Professor Langton is an anthropologist, a geographer, but also an advocate for her people, a mother and a grandmother. Having worked in several academic fields, she received an Order of Australia in 1993 and became the founding chair for the University of Melbourne's Australian Indigenous Studies, a position she's held since 2000. Professor Langton is a prolific writer. Her anthropological approaches, for me, provide in writing some of the best explanations of our sacred geography. Her collaboration on the first Australians changed our Australian historical concept of ourselves. This is but a highlight to the depth of the contribution she has made to Indigenous research. Personally, I came to know Professor Langton through her work on education reform in Shepparton with Paul. However, it is really through her Boyer lectures in 2012 on Indigenous economic reform that I was struck by the complex thinking Professor Langton subjects herself to. She wants to see change. She wants us as Indigenous people to be healthy, to have rights to our land and to be participants in an economy that also belongs to us. I have great pleasure in welcoming Professor Langton as our 2017 Dungala.
Thank you to Rochelle and Belinda for your very warm welcome and your beautiful welcome. It was awesome, as Sean said, to smell the gum leaves burning and to hear you speak language, Belinda. That's the second great speech I've heard you make in public. And thank you to Paul and Sean. And thank you very, very much to the Dungala Children's Choir and to Deborah Cheatham and wonderful Tony. If I talk any more about you, I'll start crying. I acknowledge all of you here tonight and thank you for coming. And I particularly want to acknowledge the Yorta Yorta people and thank the elders past and present for their guidance, and also to acknowledge all of the Yorta Yorta people and thank them for welcoming me onto their country. I also want to thank the Kaiela Institute. Here in the heart of Yorta Yorta country, the Rumbalara Football and Netball Club is an exemplar of leadership, teamwork and achievement. It is more than a hub for regional sports competition and training. It is a school for empowerment. The Yorta Yorta people, like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across the country, are well experienced in the disempowerment that arises from decades of philosophically bankrupt Indigenous affairs policy settings. Not content to accept this as their fate, old and young leaders have developed a blueprint for their empowerment. Led by the indomitable Yorta Yorta leader and strategist Paul Briggs, a team of local people have contributed to the design of the Empowered Communities and Empowered Peoples Design Report. And I particularly want to acknowledge Ian Trust, who's here tonight, particularly because of his wonderful work in Kununurra and the region, the East Kimberley, and on the Empowered Communities and Empowered Peoples Design Report. This report presents the nation with a powerful vision and a means of ending Indigenous poverty and disparity. It presents an original and highly practical approach to engagement between regions like the Greater Shepparton region with state and federal governments so that governance and funding are effective and efficient. It presents a sound methodology for achieving outcomes in overcoming Indigenous disadvantage. The Empowered Communities Report opens with a contrast of failure and success. The 2015 Closing the Gap scorecard with its litany of failures are detailed, and then the successes of the NRL and the AFL are presented in stark contrast. This is worth reading out loud. 2 days later, that is after the launch of the Closing the Gap report, on the 13th of February 2015, the Indigenous All-Stars and National Rugby League All-Stars met for another annual reckoning on the Gold Coast. The Indigenous All-Stars defeated the NRL All-Stars 20-6. The report continued. The following Friday, on 20th of February 2015, the AFL Indigenous All-Stars played the West Coast Eagles. West Coast has come from behind to record its first win of a new season over the AFL Indigenous All-Stars in an entertaining exhibition game at Medibank Stadium in Perth. The Eagles trailed by 10 points at half-time, but injected young legs into the game after the break to kick 3 goals to none in the second half and win 49-41. The match was played in front of a sellout crowd of close to 10,000. We know the statistics cited in the Empowered Communities report to draw our attention to the obvious disadvantage. Yet we also know that we could tip the scales towards parity if all Aboriginal people performed their everyday lives like these champions. The report gives us these figures to think about. Indigenous players make up 9% of the AFL and 12% of the NRL, despite comprising only 3% of the national population. The stark underrepresentation of mainstream Australians in these two football codes are two Closing the Gap targets facing the nation. And herein lies the logic of the Empowered Communities, Empowered Peoples blueprint for Indigenous success. These examples show what is possible when the talents and potential of our people are able to flourish. The report goes on. It shows what is possible when entry barriers are low and access is on merit, not background. It shows what is possible when the institutions involved actively welcome and support Indigenous participation, like these football codes do. It shows what is possible when they honour the dignity of their Indigenous players by being vigilant in combating racism. The lessons to be drawn from this success are not trivial. If these traits could be equally devoted to the challenges of development and the factors driving success with individuals, families and communities applied to wider social and economic participation in Australia, the gap on Indigenous disadvantage would soon close. The Empowered Communities leaders from 8 regions around Australia have set an ambitious but necessary reform agenda, and it is the implications of this approach for the Goulburn Valley people that I will attempt to identify tonight. The Aboriginal leaders of the Greater Shepparton area who have embarked on this road to recovery have an understanding of the history of exclusion that led to our disempowerment and the need to accelerate policy reform to reach parity in Aboriginal socio-economic status. During that long period, when Australian governments were determined to assimilate Aboriginal people and regarded those of us who lived in rural areas as outcasts, the damage caused to our societies might have seemed irreversible. a destruction so prolonged that any recovery seemed impossible. I should say about myself, for instance, that my grandfather's people are the Imam people, and after the massacres of the late 19th century, such as the Hornet Bank massacre in central Queensland in the upper Dawson River Valley, then at the end of World War I, they were struck down by the Spanish flu, and then in the 1920s forced march to Warrabinda. So I know what that's like too. Since 1972, with the official end to these genocidal policies, a resurgence of Aboriginal agency has led to the growth of Indigenous organisations and social enterprises, and recently Aboriginal-owned businesses. And we see the evidence of this driving along Wyndham Street in Shepparton, and it's congratulations on the new offices for the Kaiela Institute. With the migration of non-Indigenous people from rural areas to the cities and large urban centres, the growth of the Indigenous sector has become an important part of the rural economy. Far from being a burden on the public purse, the economic benefits of government investment in the Indigenous sector can be seen as an investment in nation building. The attitudes from the assimilation era that cast Aboriginal people as permanently on the margins are changing slowly as more Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians come to understand that rural Indigenous populations are permanent and growing, and Indigenous-owned service bodies provide essential services that sustain rural Australia socially and economically. The next phase of Indigenous empowerment will depend on increasing inputs in education and enterprise development by professionalising the Indigenous workforces and developing the Indigenous sector as a core component of the economy of rural Australia. The goals of the Empowered Communities 10-year plan are ones that all Australians should be able to agree with. And I'm quoting here from the report. There are two parts to our development goal that are each of equal importance and are to be pursued concurrently and constantly tested to determine whether we are most productively using available resources and opportunities. First, our goal is to close the gap on the social and economic disadvantage of the Indigenous Australians of the Empowered Communities regions. Second, we aim to enable the cultural recognition and determination of Indigenous Australians of the Empowered Communities regions so that we can preserve, maintain, renew and adapt our cultural and linguistic heritage and transmit our heritage to future generations. The University of Melbourne has a role to play in achieving these goals. The University has developed a partnership with the Golden Valley community and signed a memorandum of understanding with the Kaiela Institute to formalise this particular partnership with the local Indigenous community to achieve better outcomes. I was recently appointed Associate Provost at the University with some responsibility for the partnership with the Golden Valley. So tonight I want my formal contribution in this role to be a mind map of what success might look like. Some of the indications are good, and we might see success sooner than we might have imagined in this area. Some years ago, two health leaders from this community approached me and Associate Professor Jane Fremantle, seeking our assistance to enrol people from Shepparton in a master's course at our School of Global and Population Health. Their goal, they said, was to professionalise the local Indigenous health workforce. The University of Melbourne has become a destination of choice for many young Golden Valley people, and the steady increase in Indigenous enrolment in our graduate and postgraduate programs augurs well for their futures, their families and their community. 3 of the Indigenous graduates who completed the program I mentioned have commenced doctoral programs and have been appointed as Post Fellows at the Post Centre for Indigenous Health in our medical faculty. This community, the Greater Shepparton area, is well served by excellent universities and technical colleges. Monash, La Trobe and Swinburne universities each have programs and projects here, and we at the University of Melbourne often collaborate with them as well in trying to develop a pipeline of Indigenous students into universities. So this week, for instance, the Indigenous Engineering Winter School for grade 11 Indigenous students from around Australia is happening in Melbourne, and we collaborate with Monash, RMIT and Swinburne in that winter school. And that's just one of our programs. These are achievements to be proud of, but I fear that progress is too slow. Last year in October, I was honoured to be asked to work with the Kaiela Institute and some of the young leaders to deliver the Golden Murray Indigenous Leadership Seminar over 2 days. The leadership team is growing and is becoming more and more effective. In just a few years, they will need to consider whether they will step into formal leadership roles and take the baton from the elders. Effective leadership is ever more necessary as the Aboriginal population of Victoria grows at exponential rates. The ABS, or Australian Bureau of Statistics, figures released recently show a 25.8% increase in the Victorian population since the last census 4 years ago. That is, the population's grown by another quarter. The growth rate of the Aboriginal population here in Shepparton is similar. Today I was given a preview of the excellent work of the Algobonia Data Unit of the Kaiela Institute. My presentation tonight is distinctly simple and general in comparison with the detailed data collection and analysis of the unit that has been designed to support the implementation of the Empowered Communities reform agenda here. Noting the progress made so far and the sacrifices made by those people who have invested in higher education, and I think there's about 27 Indigenous people enrolled from this area in universities, I briefly examined the data to imagine further success and to consider targets for higher education achievement to build a broad professional Aboriginal leadership and hasten the closing of the gap in this region. First though, my strongest advice is that these targets should mirror the actual number of youth who should complete Year 12 or equivalent, who should proceed to post-secondary and tertiary education careers, and who should take their place in the professions and business. Also, I strongly advise that the range of disciplines, professions and qualifications pursued should be as broad as possible so that full economic participation by local Aboriginal people can be achieved. I have in mind professions such as engineering, architecture, business, accounting, commerce, medicine, dentistry, nursing, computer science, robotics, the trades, as well as the more conventional professions which have for some decades been the destination of Indigenous people, such as teaching, law and the humanities. With the release recently of Australian Bureau of Statistics data, and I brought a PowerPoint, but I think it's impossible for most people to see it, we have some interesting figures. So according to the ABS, on census night, I can explain all of this to you. It's pretty boring stuff, really, but there are some exciting bits in it. So, according to the ABS, on last census night, there were 3,561 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander persons in the Greater Shepparton statistical area. The median age of this population was 22 years old. This is similar to the median age for other Victorians and Australians. The newly released data tells us also this is a relatively disadvantaged population across several key indicators. However, the most striking feature of the latest population data is the remarkable growth in the youth population recorded. An additional 252 Aboriginal youngsters in the 0 to 4 age cohort were recorded, representing an increase of 11.5% in that age cohort. Just to say, the usual natural population growth of a country, of a population like Australia's population, is about 2.5%. 11.5 is extraordinary, but listen to this. An additional 530 Aboriginal youth in the 5 to 14 age group were recorded, representing an increase of 25.2% in that age cohort. Now, I'll just say here, many demographers say, without any evidence I might add, that these increases are attributable only to more people identifying as Aboriginal. That can't be possible with an 11.5% increase in the 0 to 4 age cohort. Nor, should I say, in the 5 to 14 age group. This is natural increase, or most of it is. In the 15 to 24 age cohort, an additional 408 persons were counted in the Indigenous population here, representing an increase of almost 20%. In the 25 to 44 age cohort, an additional 501 persons were counted, representing an increase of 22.9%. And this is interesting. It's not what I expected. In the 45 to 64 age cohort, an additional 363 persons were counted, representing an increase of 16.6%. That's an enormous growth in the adult population. But in any case, the large increase in the youth population indicates that these population increases can be attributed, as I say, to natural growth and not merely increased identification as Aboriginal. But these figures present a number of challenges, most important of which is the capacity to ensure that these youngsters achieve high educational standards. A total of 782 under 14-year-olds, an additional 782 under 14-year-olds will need to be educated to achieve Year 12 completion or equivalent. A further 408 persons in the 15 to 24-year-old age cohort will require secondary and post-secondary education. So that's about 1,250 additional youngsters just in this area. Will these younger generations have the skills, knowledge and ability to take advantage of opportunities to improve their lives and sustain the culture and identity of the Yorta Yorta people? Without high levels of educational achievement, it is unlikely. There is no valid reason why there should be any disparity in educational outcomes as between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in this town. Fear and doubt are not insurmountable. Effective leadership and teamwork make champions, as we see from the AFL and NRL track record. Much of the Indigenous disadvantage in this area can be attributed to income disparity. So, my rough reckoning of the available data is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander income in the Greater Shepparton region is 20% less than the weekly average for Australian workers. Now, that's not a terrible gap as compared with some of the remote regions, but it is striking. But I want to say also that the gap between all residents of the Greater Shepparton region and, say, Melbourne is quite large in and of itself. In any case, data to be released in October will allow us the opportunity to better analyse the income data. So this Indigenous disparity of 20% in income presents us with a challenge. What would it take to achieve income parity for the Indigenous people of this region? What we know from closing the gap and research is that higher education achievement amongst the Indigenous population closes the gap. It closes the gap absolutely. So let's look at the data on education achievement in this region. There were 227 Year 12 or equivalent completions for Indigenous people in the city of Greater Shepparton in 2011, and this represented an increase of almost 18% between 2006 and 2011, so a 20% increase. So that's an extraordinary achievement. There were 315 Year 12 or equivalent completions in the Greater Shepparton area. Now, for non-Indigenous people, of course, the figure's much higher. Year 12 equivalence achievements are 18,245 in the same ABS data set. And so, with the help of my friends, and I want to acknowledge Kristen Smith, Jasmine Lyons, Darren Clinch, who's also a PhD student at our university, an Indigenous PhD student, and as a late call, Richard James walked past and worked out a figure off the top of his head for me. The parity targets that are the minimum goals, in my view, are the following. For secondary student enrolments and completions, we need to increase the completions by 194. But let me just say, that's a static figure. The population grows every year, and the population will grow exponentially. I've got the figures from the ABS on the projected Aboriginal population growth, and by 2026, our population will be, it is projected, not the about 670,000 that it is now, but over 950,000. So this is why we need targets. Now, as I say, these are basic static targets just to achieve statistical parity. 194 additional secondary students, technical or further education an additional 16, university an additional 9, Year 12 or equivalent an additional 347 completions right now. The community of Greater Shepparton has the opportunity to close the gap and to reach parity targets sooner than other rural regions. Each year we throw our hands up and we read the closing the gap scorecard, fail, 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 maybe, 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 fail, fail. And, you know, it becomes as Professor Ian Anderson put it, a festival of misery. That's not the case here, because as I said, the increase in secondary students in 2006 to 11 was 20%. If the leaders here can sustain those increased rates in educational outcomes, you will close the gap more quickly than anywhere else in the country, I think. More quickly even than in the urban areas. And I think we know why that would be the case. It's because of the calibre of the leadership here and the rigorous thinking. So the education targets I propose are just a few of the targets that are possible to imagine. You'll remember a few years ago when Richard Goyder was the Dungala Kaiela orator, we concocted some employment targets and he met them very quickly. There are others, and so we have lots to talk about, I think, in our partnership. However, as I say, it is most important to ensure that all children enjoy the right to an education and the highest possible education that would ensure their success and well-being in their lives. So in reality, the target isn't 300 or 400, it's almost 800, because that's the total number of kids at the moment in that under 24 age group. That's the additional number here, but also that will keep growing, and I think looking at the population projections out to 2026, we need to at least quadruple that number, so we probably need a target of 3,000 by 2026. And I could be wrong about this, but I think the population projections will be even more because the ABS is so conservative in its estimates and it always undermeasures the Indigenous population. Indigenous people who complete higher education awards close the gap. And this, I believe, is the most important strategy for closing the gap. So I have some pretty interesting data sets to share with you, but I think perhaps it's too difficult to listen to numbers. But I just wanted to say a few things about median weekly incomes. So, for Australia, a personal median weekly income is 662, and for a household, 1,438. In Victoria, it's about the same, but for Shepparton, it's lower by quite significant gaps. So it's about $100 less per person in this area than the Australian median, and $100 less than the Victorian median. For a family, it's about $300 to $400 less, and for households, it's about, again, $300 to $400 less. So this area, the entire population, has a lower income, median income, than Australians in general and Victorians in general. The Indigenous income gap is, as I say, about 20% across personal and household median incomes. So the existing gap of say 10 to 15% then is exacerbated for the Indigenous community. And so compared to the rest of Australia, the gap is quite large. But as I say, education, higher education, achieves parity in income more quickly than any other strategy. And that applies to everybody, but we know this from the Indigenous higher education data. I was fascinated by these figures. The current Indigenous educational status is, we have a total of 214 here in Shepparton in secondary school, 37 in technical and further education, and 34 at university. When I first came to Victoria 18 years ago, the total number of Year 12 completions for the entire state was 1. Then a few years later, for Indigenous people, a few years later I had another look, it was 12. So, and I think a small handful of Indigenous people from here had achieved some university education when I first came here about 15 years ago. Now you have 34 enrolled in university. So, as I say, closing the gap here is not the challenge that it is in other parts of Australia, and I believe that with targets, and we have lots to talk about now about achieving those targets, we can close the gap here. So, in conclusion, I wish the Greater Shepparton community success, and in particular the local Aboriginal people and the traditional owners, the Yorta Yorta traditional owners, the Kaiela Institute, and Algabonya as the vehicle for implementing the Empowered Communities vision. And of course, all the other Aboriginal organisations that make this region more successful than most in overcoming the burden of history and a wonderful place to visit. That's why I keep coming back. Thank you.
Professor Langton, for your contribution to defining Shepparton and challenging the idea of Indigenous social and economic reform in a regional and local context. It's given us much to consider. Before I introduce our final speaker, I'd like to thank you for attending tonight and ask that you remain seated while we end this evening with presentations of gifts. I would like to now introduce the Vice-Chancellor Glyn Davis, Professor of Political Science and Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Melbourne. Professor Davis has been a long supporter of the Dungala Kaiela Oration, bringing the idea to life with Paul in 2008 with our first orator, Dr. Carmen Lawrence. Professor Davis then took the stage himself to be the 7th Dungala Kaiela orator in 2015, providing a rich and comprehensive timeline of Indigenous activism and policy. Professor Davis will conclude this evening with a response to Professor Langton's keynote address and closing remarks. Could you please welcome him to the stage?
Thank you very much, and we're here tonight to hear Marcia, so I'm going to be brief, but I do want to mirror her optimism because there's something very interesting happening here in Shepparton that's worth reflecting on. I say that in this extraordinary place. There are very few places that just exude community, but this extraordinary football and netball club is such an extraordinary example of how community is established, built, supported, and I think an enormous tribute to everyone who's involved in making it possible. Marcia has spoken about a resurgence in Aboriginal agency, a sense of being able to take control and shape destiny. And this is a powerful thing for people to see, and here in Dungala we see it firsthand. Here as we celebrate the 21st anniversary of this extraordinary club, but a club built on 100 years of struggle and contribution, and a club of champions, an extraordinary place. Those who gather here week by week for sport and a range of other activities are creating community and sustaining it, and even better when they do it in language, as we heard. And this sense of a community is something we're seeing across Australia, but it's an increasingly part, and it's something that Marcia wanted us to understand. As she showed us tonight, we're seeing a flourishing of individuals and organisations and social enterprises with a shared Indigenous base. We're seeing more Indigenous owned businesses, and in her 2012 Boyer lectures, The Quiet Revolution, Marcia set this out in really compelling detail. An unexpected narrative of how Indigenous people are taking control, building their own lives, building their own businesses, and making possible community. Parts of that lecture series sparked a lot of controversy. We would expect nothing less from Marcia. But as a true academic, she argued her case. It wasn't just a set of assertions, it was actually profoundly based in the evidence. She's never shied away from controversy where it's been warranted, and she believes in truth-telling, as you heard tonight. And often that truth-telling surprises us. So where we might have expected a narrative that pointed to lots of difficulties, that gap, after all, is still very real, and it's still felt by every Indigenous person here in Shepparton. In fact, she wanted us to see the other side of what's happening, and she used the statistics that she's gathered, and it will be reinforced by the work that's now being done by the Kaiela Institute to show how important those changes are. It is unexpected but profoundly moving to hear her argue that here in Shepparton the gap can be closed more quickly, more profoundly than anywhere else in the country, and then using the data about income, ownership, and above all education to show how that might happen is, again, unexpected, powerful, important, and worth reflecting on. The point about these wonderful lectures, and thank you very much for the suggestion. It was somehow me that did this in part. It was Paul Briggs, of course, who thought of this series, made it possible, who's been the guiding spirit behind it all. And I remember those conversations back in 2008, and Paul saying, we need a national discussion, we need a forum that brings people together to talk about Indigenous matters, and it should be here in Shepparton. We should be able to encourage national speakers to come to Shepparton and speak to the nation from this platform, and he has achieved that. And tonight we've heard yet another example of what this platform makes possible. This afternoon I had a bit of time with Paul and at the Institute and his colleagues there, his very fine colleagues, and I heard the same optimism from him that tonight we heard from Marcia. That things are changing in this town, that there are outcomes that he would not have anticipated a decade ago. But in fact what he's telling us is the programs that he and others in this community have been putting in place for the last 15 years or longer are beginning to pay off, and they're showing up, and they're particularly showing up in the opportunities open to young Indigenous people in this town. No one's arguing the gap is closed, no one's arguing the problem is being solved, but they are arguing very strongly that the trends are for the first time in the right direction. I didn't necessarily expect to hear that tonight. I was delighted to hear it. We are very privileged to have amongst us Marcia Langton. We're very lucky that her rigour and her research has always been about pointing where the evidence goes, not telling us what we expect or want to hear. That is the sign of a true intellect and a true academic, and she has been that all through her career and all of the issues she has taken on and here tonight. So would you please join me in saying thank you to Professor people are ringing already. I think on behalf of Paul, to say thank you for being part of this community, part of this important event, and for your words tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for attending the Dungala Kaiela Oration for 2017. It's Katrina. Any? Do we? Okay. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. Yeah, and I look forward to seeing you next year.